Oh, we've talked many times about how Canada's regulatory review of the proposed Northern Gateway oil pipeline has been hijacked. 4,522 people have registered to testify before the review panel in a campaign that one U.S.-funded lobbyist called Mob the Mic, because basically they took all the rubby-dubs from the Occupy Wall Street protests, Occupy Toronto protests, and they had them sign up to testify against the panel for the sole purpose of delaying it and bogging it down. I mean, don't take it from me. Take it from Eric Swanson, a lobbyist who received more than $600,000 from U.S. foundations precisely to do that. Here's him boasting in his own words about jamming up our system.
We're actually very happy. We helped sign up 1,600 people to participate at those hearings.
Now, we've shown you the fake names like Captain Jack Sparrow and Caveman. We've shown you the class of elementary school children who've all signed up. We've shown you how foreigners, including Hugo Chavez's state-owned oil company called Citgo, which doesn't want Canada as a competitor to OPEC, how they've signed up too. But I missed one name. I mean, look, it's hard to pay close attention to every single one of the 4,522 names when you're looking through them. You get a little tired. But who do you think would be the most offensive opponent of this Canadian national project in your mind? Foreigners from OPEC? Well, not really. I mean, that's sort of their job to fight against Canada because we're breaking their OPEC cartel. It's not offensive, really, that Venezuela hates the oil sands. It's offensive that we're letting them in to our regulatory process in Canada. But it's not really surprising or shocking that Hugo Chavez, that bully, opposes a Canadian oil pipeline. Foreign foundations like the New York-based Rockefeller Foundation or the San Francisco-based Tides Foundation, I mean, they've bankrolled dozens of front groups to oppose the pipeline. But again, why would you really blame a leopard because it has spots? I mean, those foreign billionaires are doing what foreign billionaires like to do. I mean, if they're not buying new yachts or jetting around with some new fashion model, they're probably trying to meddle in our country or some other country. Again, it's not really them that I blame. It's the Canadian Review Panel I blame for allowing themselves to be hijacked from these foreign special interests. How about the official party of anti-oil sands bigotry, the NDP? I mean, they're outrageous, to be sure. I mean, once upon a time, the Socialist Party in Canada believed in industry and well-paid working men and women. The only quarrel they had was who owned the means of production. I mean, the old NDP was all in favor of industry and factories and mines. They just wanted the proletariat to own them, not the bourgeoisie. Well, today's NDP isn't for industry or for work, really. They're hostage to special interest groups, especially environmental extremists. So the NDP has chosen to oppose the well-paying jobs in the oil sands and that would be created by building the pipeline. Sort of like Barack Obama chose Hollywood airheads like Daryl Hannah over construction workers when he vetoed the Keystone XL pipeline. The NDP has done the same thing. They've chosen Canada's eco-radicals over blue-collar workers, too. It's sort of sad, actually. But there's two MPs in particular, Megan Leslie, and the NDP MP from Halifax, and Claude Gravel, the NDP MP from Ontario. They've both condemned the oil sands. You can see them here now. They've opposed the pipelines. They even both flew down to Washington, D.C. to lobby the U.S. government to oppose the Keystone XL pipeline. And the NDP is against the Northern Gateway pipeline, too, which is funny because when I called up the parliamentary offices of both Leslie and Gravel, they admitted that these two MPs have never actually been to the oil sands themselves. You get that? The NDP MPs who condemn the oil sands have never had the curiosity or the open-mindedness or even the courtesy to visit the very city they defame on a daily basis. They haven't gone to Fort McMurray ever, but they have time to fly down to foreign countries like Washington, D.C. to trash talk Canadian working men and women. But no, that's not the most outrageous opponent of the pipeline. I mean, look, it's the NDP. They're politicians. They've chosen sides. They've chosen rich environmental special interests over blue-collar workers. Fine, that's their job as parliamentarians to take sides on controversial issues. Let voters punish or reward them. Frankly, it's a little more intellectually honest than the federal Liberal Party, which is too cowardly to take sides either side on the oil sands issue or the pipeline. So, no, not even the NDP trash talkers who oppose Canadian jobs are the most execrable opponents of the pipeline. They're supposed to take positions. No, the most outrageous opponent of the Northern Gateway pipeline of the 4,522 is a government employee who has written to the government's review panel asking them to stop the pipeline using his government email account. Let me tell you why this is outrageous. In Canada, politicians are partisan. That's the NDP MPs I'm talking about. The civil service is neutral. Their job is to do their job as bureaucrats, to take orders, not to interfere. If they have a disagreement with the government, they can quit the neutral, nonpartisan government job they have and run for office themselves. I mean, can you imagine, for example, if a bureaucrat working within the bowels of the National Energy Board had written to the panel condemning the pipeline? I mean, such bias would throw the whole process into doubt. I mean, who could trust that the civil service was holding a fair hearing? No one. Because while one arm of the government was pretending to be neutral, another arm would be undermining it. But the bureaucrat I'm talking about, the one who wrote to the review panel to oppose the pipeline, isn't from the National Energy Board or the Environment Department. He's from the CBC. I'm talking about Dimitri Gammer, a bureaucrat working for Canada's state broadcaster, taking money from taxpayers. Now, Gammer's job doesn't have anything to do with pipelines or oil or environmental regulation. He's some CBC hack. But he is weighed into the pipeline debate, not on air as a commenter, but directly with a formal comment registered with the review panel, a legal protest demanding that they stop the pipeline. He's become a party, someone legally intervening in the process. And he didn't do so in his personal capacity, which is still against generally accepted rules of conduct for civil servants. He did so using his government email account. Check this out. Check this out. Here's Gammer's letter written to the pipeline review panel opposing it. He registered this with the review panel. The first thing that jumps out at me is that Gammer works in Toronto. That's our highlight there from this page. He's just another drone at the CBC's government headquarters in the shadow of the CN Tower, but he wants to give orders to stop a West Coast pipeline. What a bully. Do you think there's a single person in the provinces of BC or Alberta where this pipeline will run that give a damn what some CBC government hack from Toronto has to say? What an arrogant little prick. But look at this. Gammer gives his contact information at the CBC. Look at his email address, dimitri.gammer@cbc.ca, his government account. Now, I wrote to Gammer at this account to ask him about this. I asked him if his opposition to the pipeline was a reflection of CBC policy. Now, I know that it is. They hate the oil sands over there. But I just wanted to know why he was using his corporate government email to disparage the pipeline. It's like writing a letter on corporate stationery. It implies that you're speaking for the company, which of course he is doing. I asked him if he was. He refused to answer. I asked Gammer if he has used other Government of Canada resources in his campaign against the pipeline. Did he write his complaint from his office, from his government computer? That would be nice. So opponents of the pipeline get to use office space, computers, email addresses, and of course take a healthy paycheck from taxpayers for their anti-oil sands activism. See, that's the problem with government journalists opposing the pipeline. It's not a personal act anymore. It's not a private act. It's a government act, a public act, because they're state broadcasters. That's what Dimitri Gammer did. I asked Gammer if he has been involved behind the scenes in helping to craft any of the CBC's anti-oil sands commentaries. The CBC has a systemic bias against Western Canada, against capitalism, against the oil industry, and especially against the oil sands in particular. They allow David Suzuki to have free advertising on their channel. They basically give him a regular propaganda slot for his lobby group. And even though he literally has 16 registered lobbyists working for him, they pretend he's a neutral scientist, lobbying the government against the oil sands. Well, did you think Suzuki was neutral? He's got 16 lobbyists in pay. Well, is Gammer part of the CBC's internal war room against the oil sands? Does he write the scripts that they read on air? Does he collude with Greenpeace and other foreign groups on their media stunts against the oil sands? I asked him about his involvement. Again, he refused to answer. Let me quote to you from Gammer's official letter that was registered with the review panel. Here I'm going to quote. I am writing this letter to discourage the proposed Enbridge pipeline from Alberta to Kitimat. Okay, I got it. So the CBC isn't doing this as some discussion. This isn't some comment. This is a legal intervention in a regulatory proceeding. They're not an outside observer anymore. They're a player now. Now, Gammer admits that he himself has profited mightily from the oil industry in the past, so he's fine with oil when he's pocketing the dough, but not when others might find work here. Look at this excerpt from his letter. Quote, in order to pay my way through university, I worked each summer as a roughneck on drilling rigs, so I certainly benefited from the oil industry, finishing school with no debt, unquote. You got that? He loves getting money from the oil patch, but just for himself, he's fine with oil for his car, for his vacations, for his life, for his bank account. He loves being rich. But now that he works in Toronto, in the center of the universe, and gets a fat paycheck from the government-run broadcaster, he doesn't like other people making money in oil anymore. But here's my favorite part of Gammer's letter. You see, he has an exceedingly rich hobby. He's very luxurious. He likes fishing. No, not down by a lake or a river. Gammer goes high end. He's a real jet setter. He's one of the 1%ers. You know, he talks about his annual fly fishing trips out on the BC coast. So each year he jets out to the West Coast for a 5-star fishing vacation. Here's what he says, quote, "My trip cost me in the neighborhood of $3,500 to $4,000. Seriously, this 1%er drops $4,000 on his fishing trips. That's what an average Canadian family makes in a month. He blew it in a week of fishing vacation. That's $500 a night. And that's part of his official comment to stop the Northern Gateway Pipeline. Despite the foreign lobbyists who are trying to stop our country from being independent, I despise them. I despise the fraudsters who are rigging the rules. I loathe the NDP, which has turned its back on working men and women to be environmentally fashionable. Yes, yes, yes. But here we have a rich CBC bureaucrat who has personally profited from his own oil work, now writing letters, formal letters, and using his government CBC email to register a legal protest to tell people out west that they can't have jobs and that Canada can't have a pipeline because he is personally worried without any scientific basis, by the way, that his $500 a night luxury fishing trip might somehow be in jeopardy. The CBC. Do you think it's just Dimitri Gammer? Do you think it's just him acting as a rogue? Well, then you haven't seen Carol McNeil, have you? Watch this clip.
And I was going through the transcript again of Peter's interview with the Prime Minister, and I thought, I think I was talking with you about this. I found it very extraordinary that the Prime Minister would be so critical, so non-diplomatic, accusing the Iranian regime of lying. And I thought, and when you put all the dots together, especially with our ever-expanding oil fields and the production expected to go way up over the next 10 to 15 years, and wanting to diversify the markets and wanting to aim for China, of course it would be in this country's financial interests if there are more economic sanctions bearing down on Iran.
Did you hear that? The CBC is seriously suggesting that Stephen Harper opposes Iran, a dictatorship that kills democracy activists, a terrorist-sponsoring state with ties to both Hamas and Hezbollah, a country actively building nuclear weapons and missiles, a country that has been sanctioned by the liberal United Nations. Carol McNeil actually thinks that the reason, the secret reason, the connected dots reason why Stephen Harper is worried about Iran is so that he can use it as a marketing ploy to push an oil pipeline. That's 9/11 truther level conspiracy theories. That is a national disgrace. That kind of sheer stupidity or malice, I don't know which it is, would be a firing offense at a respectable news network. But at the CBC, that kind of trutherism, that's official corporate policy. Dimitri Gammer is fighting against the oil sands through the legal process. Carol McNeil is fighting against the oil sands on TV with her truther conspiracy theories. Both of them are happy to take money from oil, either directly like Gammer has, or through taxes to pay for her government employer like McNeil does. The CBC is not neutral. Like the U.S. Rockefeller Foundation, like Hugo Chavez, like the Saudi Embassy, the CBC is biased and bigoted against Western Canada and our booming oil industry. Just one more reason to end their annual billion-dollar bailout at taxpayers' expense.